Yorinobu Arasaka is a pivotal character within the main story of Cyberpunk 2077, but at surface level, his full depth isn't expanded upon all too much. In fact, throughout our interactions with Yorinobu, he's always staged as an antagonist to our goals. So what have I told you? That even despite doing this, Yorinobu Arasaka in actual fact did absolutely nothing wrong. More than that, he's a frickin' hero. And here's why. You see, for all Silverhands do whatever it takes to stop Arasaka speeches, I'd argue that Yorinobu is the only one actually capable and willing to follow through on that objective. To figure out exactly why though, we'll have to cover a timeline of major events and turning points throughout his life. So without further ado, let's start right back at the beginning. Yorinobu Arasaka, born September 8th, 1995, was the first of the two children that Saburo Arasaka and his third wife Michiko would have, with Hanako being born 4 years later in 1999. The two also share an older half-brother, Kei Arasaka, born back in 1980. For his first 21 years of life, Yorinobu was raised like a little prince alongside his sister Hanako, with no expense spared to give him the best education and upbringing. But on the day he graduated from the University of Tokyo, everything changed. It was at this time Saburo decided to divulge to his son the true nature of the Arasaka Corporation. Now, quite what was said to the boy is uncertain, but what is clear is that when faced with the truth of his family's wealth and power, bearing in mind it's afforded Yorinobu himself a life of extreme luxury, Yorinobu did not turn a blind eye to suit his own ends, but rather fled that very night and set about concocting plans to take down his father's empire. Just to re-emphasize for a second, a guy who had pretty much everything decided that quickly to give it all up for seemingly morality-based purposes. Now, the same can't be said for the likes of Kei Arasaka, who accepted his father's reality without question. So it's certainly not something that just anyone would choose to reject. Now, there may be a more selfish reason Yorinobu made this choice here admittedly, but that's a piece of speculation which we'll get to a bit later on. Now, there's a shard in Konpeki Plaza named Tamed Dragon, a biography of Yorinobu Arasaka, which sums up a lot of his subsequent years pretty well. It's not too long and is pretty comprehensive. Reading, quote, "In many ways, the story of Yorinobu Arasaka resembles an ancient parable. The younger son of one of the modern world's most powerful CEOs renounces his heritage, forfeits his birthright, and instead chooses a rough and tumble life on the streets of Tokyo, only to later scamper back home to the warm, sheltered bosom of his family with his tail tucked. At least, that is the story most have pieced together from official sources. But why did Yorinobu betray his father in the first place? Why did he return? For several years, I dug deeper, followed leads, reached out to his former friends and acquaintances. Slowly, I began to unearth answers to some of the public's most burning questions. Over the next few years, various eyewitnesses spotted Yorinobu in the company of a nomad group known as Kotetsu no Ryu, or the Steel Dragons. As part of this youthful rebellion, he purposefully involved himself in altercations with Arasaka agents and promoted anti-corporate slogans. After his family eventually confirmed Yorinobu's involvement, Saburo renounced his son, and Kei, Saburo's eldest son, swore to exact revenge on his younger brother. Ironically, it was later at Kei's funeral that Yorinobu at last reconciled with his father. Stubbornly proud to have fought, many were surprised by the Arasaka patriarch's conciliatory approach. What caused Saburo to change his mind? What role might have Yorinobu's sister Hanako played in their peaceable reunion? That much yet remains to be discovered." End quote. So to expand on that just a little bit, yes, Yorinobu did in fact go on to form a gang known as the Steel Dragons. Jackie also shares this fact with us moments before we make our way to the penthouse. And our dialogue options generally still merely dismiss him as a corpo big shot with corpo intentions. In fact, throughout the game, we're only given options to talk about Yorinobu negatively, which no doubt reinforces him being mistakenly labelled as a villain. As for Kei Arasaka, he dies in 2023, convinced to commit seppuku around the same time Arasaka Tower is nuked by Johnny Silverhand and the rest of that squad. The fact that Yorinobu and Saburo make up at Kei's funeral actually falls into place for a whole variety of reasons. I'll outline them now, but we'll be expanding on many of these points as the video goes on. First, most simply, Kei is dead. The brother who'd sworn revenge on Yorinobu is no longer a looming threat. Second, and this is a really big one I think, Yorinobu's role in the Fourth Corporate War wasn't to side with Militech, but instead work with the Japanese government to try and nationalize certain parts of Arasaka. I guess he didn't care about Militech winning the war either, he just didn't want Arasaka to get stronger.
I don't care if you win. I need Kylo Ren to lose.
However, it was only after Arasaka Tower in Night City was literally nuked, and whilst that did hurt Arasaka at the time, they eventually did just shrug it off with a classic.
Oh no! Anyway...
Then Yorinobu finally realized that taking down Arasaka from the outside was never gonna happen. He knew then what he had to do.
The beast's hide is too thick to be pierced from the outside. I must cut through it from the inside.
As for Saburo forgiving his son and welcoming him back so easily, well, whilst I don't doubt that Hanako did play a part in appealing to her father's less abrasive nature, there's a far more simple reason, especially after Kei's death, for welcoming Yorinobu back into the family.
No. They're not gonna think like me. They're gonna become me.
There's not a doubt in my mind that the result of the Devil ending, where Saburo uses a biochip to take over his son's body, was actually the plan all along. I'll get onto the specifics in a bit, but just know for now that whilst Yorinobu and Saburo still had utterly opposed intentions, it was in the interest of both at this time to welcome Yorinobu back. But whilst I think Yorinobu understood his father's reasons, I very much doubt Saburo actually figured out his son's true intentions for rejoining the family. At any rate, he definitely believed he could control Yorinobu more than he actually could. After that, the Arasaka company started to split into factions, with Hanako at the helm of the Kiji faction, more aligned to Saburo's traditional vision for the company, and Yorinobu leading the Taka faction, a more militant band with this secret objective to sow chaos, albeit more subtly, from within the company itself. There's also the Heito faction, headed up by Michiko Arasaka, Kei's daughter, but that's less important right now. This all takes us up to when Yorinobu stole the biochip shortly before the heist. So the story goes that Yorinobu ventured down to Mikoshi and stole a biochip containing an engram. Specifically, he chose the engram of Johnny Silverhand, and whilst it's never definitively explained why, there's a number of potential reasons, I think. Yorinobu stores the chip in Konpeki Plaza while sorting out a deal to sell it to Netwatch, and during this time receives a call from Anders Hellman, which, thanks to Evelyn's brain dance, we can listen to in full.
They'll have my head for this.
Then you shall perish for a good cause.
But
Make yourself comfortable. I need a minute to finish.
The program is still in the trial phase. We cannot take it to market as is.
We shall see soon enough.
Please speak with your father. He's taken a particular interest in this project. He can certainly explain the risks.
My father's a tired, visionless old graybeard who thinks nothing will change, and he'll live forever in his tiny, frozen bubble.
I should not even be listening to such things.
You will listen to this. Saburo is an adult despot, utterly removed from reality. Stuck in some fossilized vision of a world that no longer exists. Of a world that may never have existed. We have not seen eye to eye for the past 20 years. I am quite sure we want now.
Read the documentation carefully. The relic requires specific storage conditions. You must...
Noted. Enough.
Hellman is of course worried, since the relic is his project, that he's going to take the fall for Yorinobu's treason. Now, Yorinobu simply telling him he'll perish for a good cause probably isn't the most comforting thing for Hellman to hear. But you have to bear in mind what's at stake here. I mean, Silverhand literally set off a nuke which killed tens of thousands of people and didn't leave a dent on Arasaka in the long term. Yorinobu is also trying to take down Arasaka, and whilst his method may not work to the interests of everybody, after all how could it will leave far less uninvolved innocents caught in the crossfire than Silverhand's did. It's also the first time we hear of Saburo's intentions to live forever. Item 1 in the evidence that Yorinobu is aware of his father's plan to possess his body someday. And as for Saburo wanting nothing to change, it's worth noting that Saburo's primary ideals were forged at the end of World War II. Seeing his once great nation utterly crippled by the West, Saburo was on the verge of committing seppuku, but in what would have been his final moments, he envisioned a future wherein the Arasaka Corporation had returned Japan to a world-dominating superpower. He stayed alive and got to work turning that vision into reality. Fast forward over 130 years, and Saburo is arguably the world's most powerful man.
He became so powerful. The only thing he was afraid of was losing his power, which eventually, of course, he did.
Indeed, Arasaka is a leading superpower in a world rife with corporate greed, exploiting the masses and keeping them poor through constant consumerism conditioning. And all in all, Saburo doesn't care about this corruption so long as Japan remains a leading global superpower. So back to the theft of the biochip, and the pertinent question, why Johnny Silverhand? Well, firstly, the most simple answer is that Johnny is an unwilling participant in the Secure Your Soul program. Many of the celebrities and rich people bought their way in, and perhaps there's a line of thinking that Johnny would be an engram more engaged in helping to take down Arasaka than somebody who'd actually gone to great expense to become part of Mikoshi. But I think there's a lot more to it than this. In Kopeki's penthouse, we can read an email between Yorinobu and one Ronald Cheever from Militech. Ronald asks the direct question, why Johnny Silverhand? Yorinobu annoyingly just says it's a long story, and to quote, come to Konpeki Plaza, and the veil of mystery shall be lifted. End quote. Something about that wording is interesting to me. Veil of mystery. Now, I may be stretching with this, but lifting the veil of mystery reminds me of when we meet Alt Cunningham beyond the veil of the Black Wall. I actually think this is potentially likely. We know Netwatch want to reach Alt Cunningham, we see it in the Pacific thread later on, and it's also only through using Johnny's engram that Alt accepts contact with us in the first place. Therefore, not only is the relic itself of value to Netwatch, but with Silverhand on it, it adds a whole extra layer of worth. It's a fairly conclusive theory, but one thing it doesn't explain is what extra value Yorinobu gets from this, other than maybe sowing an extra layer of chaos for Arasaka. This led me to pursue two more potential theories. Now, one is very far-fetched and probably isn't true, but the other may just well be. First of the two mostly comes from how cagey Evelyn is during the information quest. Listen to what she says when we ask for Yorinobu's intentions with the chip.
So what's Yorinobu due to walk away with?
Unimportant. You focus on the biochip.
What could cyberspace's watchers and protectors offer him? Intelligence on his enemies?
That doesn't matter in the least. Because you'll make sure the transaction never happens, and I get the chip.
Look, fair enough if she has no idea, but a continued refusal to share details or even just theorize here has got me a tiny bit suspicious. Later again, after the brain dance, she responds with a similar confidence.
You're sure Yorinobu doesn't expect this kind of move from you?
He's got no idea. Trust me. He's too busy with Netwatch to give me that kind of attention. Besides, even if some suspicion takes root in his mind, it shouldn't matter. He won't react in time. And that's something you'll handle, right?
We find out later that Evelyn was hired by the Voodoo Boys, who want the chip as much as Netwatch, and this kind of mirrors the same conflict which plays out between the two in Pacifica later. But what if Evelyn and Yorinobu planned together for the biochip to be stolen all along? With Silverhand back out in the world and hell-bent on taking down Arasaka, it could cause all kinds of problems for Saburo. We point out that the heist seems far too perfect and easy, and this would explain why. It would also explain that thing of Adam Smasher being able to see us hiding when we look at him with the threat detector. But I think on the whole, it's an unlikely theory. Yorinobu would have no control over when or if the relic would activate or who it would end up with. Silverhand already failed to bring down Arasaka with a nuke, and overall, there's just too many players involved in the heist for it to be a predictable and sound plan of Yorinobu's. But there might be another reason, which also explains the wanting to sell it to Netwatch, as well as what Yorinobu gains from Alt Cunningham's being contacted. At this point, Yorinobu knows that Saburo plans to use his body, and likely a line of subsequent descendants, to make himself functionally immortal. With the addition of Soulkiller and Mikoshi, this is possible for Saburo even after he's killed. And who invented Soulkiller? Who do we see in multiple endings has the power to destroy Mikoshi? That's right, Alt Cunningham. Now, granted, the details of this one again aren't concrete, especially the fact that Netwatch had no plan to work with Alt Cunningham but rather wanted to capture her, but hey, I'm still partial to the belief that Yorinobu was maybe hoping to enlist the help of Alt, even a subdued one, to infiltrate and destroy Mikoshi, thus preventing his father from ever using his body to return. Now, I know what you're gonna say. Any one of these might be true, but there's no evidence to definitively support any particular one. So taking a step back from the canonical reason as to why Yorinobu took Silverhand's engram for a second, let's look at how it works poetically. I think, if anything, Yorinobu actually sees himself somewhat in Silverhand. Both are a similar age, or would be. They're hellbent on taking down Arasaka, And back in the day, before the tower got nuked, they operated with similar methods by staging riots and the like. In another lifetime, perhaps the two could have been allies. Hell, imagine a timeline where Yorinobu slotted the biochip instead of V. That would have been an interesting pairing. Anyway, my point to all of this is to illustrate just how anti-corp Yorinobu actually is, making moves which, one way or another, are entirely against the company's and, more importantly, his father's interests. This escalates to its peak during the heist. Now, I don't know about you, but the first time I played the Heist back in 2020 without wider knowledge as to what was going on, I was totally sold that Yorinobu was the villain of this game. Though having an actual villain as his bodyguard, while Saburo has Takamura, who becomes an ally of sorts, certainly furthers this point of view. But let's look at this scene again with the context we now have, and you might realize a few things.
そもそも俺のことを気にしたことなんかないだろう。あんたの問題点はそこだ。世界は自分中心に回ってると思ってる。傲慢だよ。頼信。どうしてここへ？直々に俺に屈辱を合わせ、立場を思い知らせるためにか。出る杭が打たれるとよく言うだろう。 自分の言葉じゃ何も言えないのか。貴様こそ自分が何をしようとしたか分かっているのか。私たちの功績を野蛮人に渡すなど、私たちの未来を。俺たちの未来。俺たち。なんかの間違いだろ。あんたは自分のことしか考えてない。 そしてこの会社のことしか。いつかこのような日が来ることは分かっていた。貴様はついに越えてはならない一線を越えたのだ。
Notice how Saburo describes the relic as our future. Now, this could easily be mistaken to mean the next big piece of tech for the company, but actually, I'd argue that this is item 2, proving that both are aware of the plan that Saburo will use the biochip to take over Yorinobu's body. This also explains Yorinobu's disgust at his father claiming it as, quote, our future. I also wonder at this point if this was in fact the plan Yorinobu was told about back when he graduated, which caused him to defect from Arasaka. Perhaps it was decided all along that he would be the future vessel for Saburo's consciousness. The Mikoshi technology has existed for a long time and was used even then to imprison Alt Cunningham, who invented Soulkiller. Now, if this were true, it would be the more selfish spin on Yorinobu's defecting from Arasaka, which I mentioned earlier, making his primary reasoning to leave self-preservation, not a deeply embedded desire to crush evil corpos and do good. It would also explain why the likes of Kei didn't resist, because perhaps as the eldest he had a different preconceived destiny, and Yorinobu didn't want his body. But regardless of whether this was the plan for Yorinobu all along, as well as his motive to initially rebel, it doesn't change the man's actions. In the end, he still fought hard against the Arasaka Corporation and never gave up in his attempts to bring the company down. We'll cover this a little bit more in the devil ending, but first let's look at one of the most shocking and memorable moments in the game.
これまでお前の愚行には目をつぶってきた。だがそれもここまでだ。この裏切りだけは決して許せん。貴様の母親が生きていなくてよかった。息子の不甲斐ない姿を目の当たりにして心を痛めずに済んだのだからな。おしっ。これでもう誰のことも許す必要はない。
So, as to the morality of this action, it's pretty layered, and whilst I'm sure many of you might say it's entirely unnecessary and straight up murder, it might actually just be one of the most heroic actions in Cyberpunk lore. First, let's look at Yorinobu's personal motives. His father may not be an immediate threat in this moment, but he does eventually plan to essentially murder his son. Yorinobu knows this, and no doubt suspects, with the biochip almost ready, that it's coming very soon. Smasher and Takamura are out of the room, room, and as far as Yorinobu's concerned, probably, there's no eyewitnesses. Saburo believes he has full control over his son, since he's always been able to rule through fear. To be honest, I think Saburo was a little naive here to think he had control over the situation, but I guess that's what happens when you have that much power through fear in general life. Also, the guy's 158 here, so I don't think it's unfair to say that he might be losing his touch. In fact though, the real reason Yorinobu is a total hero here is because Saburo, in his extreme old age, was becoming a lot too trigger happy. If we go up to the roof and loot his AV, not only can we find the awesome Satori katana, but also Saburo's datapad with diary entries. And in a world where everyone's using tiny tablets now, old man Saburo is sticking with this ginormous clunky thing. Better security encryption perhaps? Nah, it's super easy to crack, barely an inconvenience. The entries cover Saburo's voyage to Night City alongside Hanako. First up, we can learn that Hellman wasn't in fact going to be killed for losing the relic to Yorinobu, but Saburo actually planned to promote the guy for his loyalty. He then goes on to explain how he won't attack a Militech port out of mercy for the innocent workers. Which, I mean, that's kinda nice. Yeah, he'll instead spare them that panic and anguish with instant death from missiles. Okay, maybe not so nice. In the final entry, Saburo entertains the notion that he could wipe Night City off the map in under 10 minutes, and states plainly and coldly that Hanako thinks he shouldn't do that, and he usually defers to her opinion. I guess that kind of explains Hanako's role as the heart of the family. She's supposed to exercise a modicum of care to balance out Saburo's more rash ideas.
Yeah, Mike can, or she can, so I don't have to.
Still, he admits that maybe destroying Night City would be best should he lose the relic, and depending on how his meeting with Yorinobu went, it was to remain an idea very much on the cards. Though, thankfully, Yorinobu made sure that it wasn't a possibility. And okay, fine, in the devil ending where Saburo returns, he doesn't then go mental and blow up Night City, at least not in the first few months, but bear in mind that in this scenario he has won and retains full control of the relic. Fortunately, thanks to Yorinobu, there's no timeline where Saburo loses and remains alive. So with all this in mind, I'll ask again, is this okay? Or was Yorinobu wrong to do this in this moment? A modern day court might rule it as such, but since the Arasaka Corp is well above the need for fair trials, that's not really something we need to go into. So morally, was this right? Let me know in the comments, and now let's move on to the aftermath. So before we reach the end of the game, we don't really cross paths with Yorinobu again. He has a hand in the float parade and sends the extraction team after we kidnap Hanako, but ironically, we don't meet him again, unless we pick the ending which is worst for him, and probably everyone else save for Hanako and Takamura, if he's even still alive. But we'll cover that in its own segment. First, what happens if we let events play out as Yorinobu planned, with the only spanner in the works being us breaking into Arasaka and destroying Mikoshi? Well, depending on the ending you choose, there'll be different snippets of information revealed about the aftermath. Let's have a listen to them stitched together.
Gentleman extraordinaire Yorinobu Arasaka confirmed that his sis, Hanako, was among the victims. So it seems we've got a change of coming at the tippity top of the megacorp, soaked in the usual gallons of blood, sweat, and tears, of course.
What's going on with Arasaka? And how's the sitch in the city?
Here's an item that might interest you. The Arasaka crisis continues. The corporation still teeters. Aggregated media mentions indicate a positively mammoth stain on the corporation's image, as well as financial and political defeat. Secure Your Soul was to be a smashing success for Arasaka. It turned into a horrific curse. They lost all resources related to the program.
Promised the rich immortality. Sold them on it. Actually collected engrams and knowledge. A bid for control. For power, I say.
Precisely. In any event, it will be some time before Arasaka successfully reorganizes. It seems you, the afterlife, are safe. For now.
So Hanako dies, and whilst I assume it was during the board meeting that we're present for in the devil ending, I do wonder how Hanako ended up there when we don't break her out of the Arasaka residence. Why would Yorinobu knowingly place her in such a dangerous situation? Bit of a head scratcher that one, but it's very tough to say if Yorinobu is directly responsible, and personally, I don't think he is, as we'll see shortly. What's more, as Delamain tells us, the Corp is crippled, though there is talk that it could reorganize in the future. With Hanako and Michiko's factions destroyed, Yorinobu Yorinobu is now the de facto leader of Arasaka entirely, and in the Johnny Temperance ending, it's explained that Yorinobu abandons peaceful negotiations with Militech, framing them for killing his father. Steve then wonders if there'll be another Corp war. Now this, interestingly, is the only place where I think the did nothing wrong arguments could fall apart. It is unclear what exactly Yorinobu's long-term intentions are once in control of Arasaka, though having allowed the company to be hit so very badly, I would guess that his intentions are far from becoming a replacement of his father. Does this mean he's simply gonna try and make Arasaka fade away? Well, I doubt that too, but that's no bad thing. I'm sure he's smart enough to know that the power vacuum caused by swiftly wiping out one of the biggest corporations in the world would no doubt lead to a time of greater unrest and violence. It's turbulent and very complicated waters to navigate with managing the Corp, but certainly isn't as simple as hitting the off switch. Whilst the point about non-peaceful negotiations with Militech doesn't sound great, without more info from future games perhaps, I don't think we can condemn him on this fact alone. Now let's finally look at the Devil ending for more details on Yorinobu's plans to dismantle Arasaka from within. I'm sure most of you know how this one goes by now. We take Hanako's deal, rescue her from the North Oak residence with or without Takamura, then lead an assault on Arasaka Tower. We retrieve Saburo's engram from Mikoshi, bear witness to Yorinobu's attempted military coup, and we may in fact be the reason that Hanako and Michiko survive here. But again, the logistics of that are a little unclear. Then we fight through the tower, defeat Adam Smasher, and finally confront Yorinobu. He's dressed in some ridiculously large cloak thing, and not much else. I notice it's like an enlarged version of what Saburo was wearing earlier, so if anyone has any ideas as to the significance of this or a reference it could be, please comment below. It's certainly a big fashion statement. Now, this scene is kinda long, but I don't think there's a more revealing moment for Yorinobu's true character. And by that, no, I don't mean how he's dressed. Let's have a listen, bit by bit, because this segment for me is what absolutely cemented Yorinobu as a good guy, and highlighted just how dark this ending really is.
Violent delights with violent ends. You? Where is my sister?
Mean your beloved sibling? One of your men almost shot and killed.
She was to remain at the estate. Stay out of the way. I tried to protect her. Any danger she was in was because of you. No one else. Where is she?
Okay, so again, Yorinobu had no intention of killing Hanako, and I think this has got to be the case across all ending timelines. One way or another though, she still probably made it to Arasaka Tower without us.
These people had a chance today, but they lost it.
A chance? A chance for what?
To forget their fear.
This how you want to help people forget their fear? By killing them. Sorry. Just don't get it.
Fear. Ever since I can remember, the one thing I cannot deny him. He knew how to cause fear in people.
Saburo.
He once told me anything of value is only a flag blowing in wind. And wind is fear. And then, you know what he did? Blew in my face. That was the one time he was wrong. And others? It worked on them. They feared him. Even now, you saw. Idiots terrified of a dead man talking from a box. Pathetic. I would change that. If only you did not appear.
You're even worse than him. Saburo ruled with an iron fist, but he didn't need a purge to hold on to power.
Power? You? You think I wanted power? 50 years ago, terrorists blew this building into smoke.
Yeah, so I heard.
And? What did it give us?
Not much.
Nothing. But I learned a lesson. If planting bombs not enough, what can you do? You become bomb.
So here's the thing, V as a character always seems very opposed to Yorinobu, and as a result I think that conditions us as players to have a natural dislike for him as well. But that bit, right there, I don't know about you, but for me, I think V should realize their mistake in this moment and be like,
what have I done?
I mean, sure, Yorinobu could be lying. He could just be as megalomaniacal as his dear old dad, worse even. But given the context of the character, not to mention the fact that he's about to die, and I think people are normally more honest at that point, I'd say we're probably safe to take this at more or less face value. Though there is always the off chance that he's upping the heroism, as that's how he wants to be remembered just before he dies. But either way, there's got to be at least some truth here. Now, the wind is fear line, I think that explains a little bit more Saburo's overconfidence back when he got killed. The one time he was wrong was in overestimating just how much fear he'd installed in his son. Which, I mean, yeah, he is literally like, hey, I'm your dad, most powerful man in the world, and I'll be taking over your body someday when I feel like it. I'd be scared if it was my dad, but then I'd probably also do everything in my power to resist such a horrific fate. Though it's the line about him becoming the bomb, which paints him as an unsung hero more than anything else. In fact, it's probably another reason Yorinobu wanted Silverhand's engram, because in a weird way, it was Silverhand's failure that inspired Yorinobu to pursue this tactic in taking down Arasaka from within, and Yorinobu was the only one who could have achieved it. There's a reason this is often called the worst ending, and it's because in having Yorinobu lose, the tragedy of what this man tried and this time failed to do is made abundantly clear in this scene.
Hanako.
Nii-san.
待っていたぞ。世界が崩れ去るときは必ずお前がそこにいる。
やめて。人の前よ。I thank you, V. That will be all.
Not all. Not yet.
I will keep my end of our agreement. You will go with Hellman.
And you?
I must stay with my brother.
Come. Time to look to your problem. Fate is a fickle mistress, isn't she?
Say what now?
You spend your whole life fighting something, only to become that very same thing. Quite literally.
I find the end of this encounter to be disturbing for a whole variety of reasons. Yorinobu kneeling with a weird intimacy on his sister's lap is actually one of the least unsettling parts. I think it's Hellman's pointing out that Yorinobu is literally about to become the very thing he swore to destroy that it gets under your skin. What's more, the YouTuber Handsome Tez, who you should also check out if you want to boatload more Cyberpunk content by the way, well, he pointed out in a couple of his videos that you can see Hanako slot Saburo's chip in this moment if you look closely. And just the way she calmly says it's time you rested, well, it's worse than killing him in this moment. She's literally wiping his mind, everything he was, just bam, gone. It's awful. It's horrible. I mean, even if we give our body to Johnny, we get to live on in some form past the Black Wall. But Yorinobu, he's just gone, like...
Everything I am died. Some new man goes sauntering away. And I'm dead.
We get to see the aftermath of this one to a greater degree than any other through 3 separate broadcasts whilst on board Arasaka's space station. The first one's pretty long, but one bit that really stands out is this, Saburo's justification of taking his son's body. Yep, we've helped create a world where natural order hasn't only been fully halted, it's also been reversed. The justification that Saburo gave Yorinobu life, and as such Yorinobu is obliged to return it at some point, well, for a start, it goes against evolution, and if we extrapolate it across generations, then it precipitates a line of immortal elites killing off their descendants in order to stay alive. I mean, we have literally evolved with the paternal instincts to die for our children if we have to. So doing this, it goes against all all morality as far as I'm concerned, and it's clear that the same view is shared by countless people within the game. Riots ensue, fears of the elite living forever start to grow, and the only face value positive to come from it is that tensions with Militech are diffused rather than escalated. More promising, yes, but don't forget that Saburo was considering wiping Night City off the map in 10 minutes a couple months ago. Saburo's intentions are still ultimately to strengthen the corporation and Japan itself. Sure, there might not be an all-out war with Militech today, but a city might randomly get obliterated on a whim tomorrow. The guy is still incredibly unhinged, and this peace move is nothing more than keeping his cards dangerously close to his chest. So at the end of the day, Yorinobu may not be a cut and dry character. There may still be some unclear controversies too lacking in evidence to condemn, but ultimately the guy is certainly not a villain like the game portrays him. Rather, he's the guy with the same anti-Arasaka intentions as Johnny Silverhand, but his position in the family, lack of rocker boy volatility, and willingness to change tack and play the long game, becoming the bomb from the inside, makes him capable of achieving what Johnny Silverhand never could. In picking anything bar the devil ending, we inadvertently give Yorinobu everything he ever wanted, and more by destroying Mikoshi. Though truly, that is no bad thing, because Yorinobu Arasaka probably did absolutely nothing wrong, and I don't doubt the world will ultimately wind up a better place with him in charge of the corporation. How much better? Yeah, that's still up for debate. I mean, realistically, I can't see much changing for the average person in Night City or the world, but then again, at least there should still be a Night City decades into the future. And maybe more importantly, the rich elites won't be killing their children in order to live forever. The fact that Arasaka remains still under Yorinobu's control and doesn't disappear completely means there's no violent power vacuum, though there might be another war between Arasaka and Militech. In fact, I'm curious to see how they handle this one in a sequel, since the lore differences to contend with are actually pretty huge. But I guess gameplay-wise, at a street level, Arasaka would just remain the same military faction as they were in this game. I guess they just couldn't be involved as heavily in a future story. It might be centered more around Mr. Blue Eyes and Nightcore, but I guess we'll just see. Now, we've broken down a lot right there, and now I have some specific questions for you. Do you think Yorinobu was totally justified in killing Saburo? Was he an unsung hero of the game, or have I missed some reasons that he's actually a villain after all? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you again, as always, to the amazing supporters over on Patreon for going the extra mile in supporting the channel. If you want early access to videos as soon as I finish them, as well as your name in these credits, then you can donate from as little as £1 a month. There's going to be a huge announcement on Phantom Liberty next week, which I'm very excited for, and you can expect a lot more Phantom Liberty content from me in the future. For now though, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this deep dive today. I'm Bram, and I'll see you soon in my next video.